and authentic information.
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour. India's Defence Minister tells ASEAN counterparts that New Delhi is committed to freedom of navigation and unimpeded lawful commerce in international waters. US and China agree to resume military communications and curb fentanyl production after Biden and Xi hold talks on the margins of the APEC summit. Israel claims to have found Hamas weapons in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. Biden says Israeli operation might stop when the Hamas loses capacity to murder people. US Senate passes a stopgap funding bill to avert government shutdown. And Australia and South Africa battle for a spot in the Cricket World Cup final. US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed during a summit to restart high-level military-to-military talks. DD India's Ira Spitzer has more from the summit location in San Francisco.
This highly anticipated meeting between the two leaders of the world's largest economies has wrapped up here on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco. Now, this meeting took place at a location about an hour's drive south of the city, and Presidents Biden and Xi spent about 4 hours together. The meeting included a working lunch followed by a walk in the gardens of this palatial estate where the meeting was being held. Now, expectations were somewhat low going in as far as at least having any major announcements on some of the big areas of disagreement between the two countries, including the U.S. and China's position on the island of Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory, as well as the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. So we didn't see any major breakthroughs on those issues, although the two sides did discuss that. Where we did see some progress, perhaps the biggest outcome of the meeting was the resumption of military-to-military communications between the two countries. Those communications had essentially been cut off from the Chinese side after a series of disagreements, including the visit by then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan last year. So essentially, at that point, there was no one that the U.S. could call in order to manage anything with the Chinese military. So that raised concerns about the competition veering into conflict, as the Biden administration likes to describe it. So that's one big outcome. And the other big outcome from the U.S. side was an agreement to work with the Chinese government to limit Chinese firms who are involved in the production of fentanyl components. Fentanyl is the powerful synthetic opioid, which has been largely responsible for the major overdose crisis here in the United States. So another potentially important agreement there. But certainly just the fact that these two countries are meeting at all, given the amount of tension in the relationship, as seen as a victory, but perhaps no major developments in some of these global conflicts where both countries play a major role. Ira Spitzer reporting for DD India at the APEC Summit in San Francisco.
Addressing a press conference after this meeting, President Biden said that the two leaders also spoke about the Israel-Hamas conflict. He said that the Hamas committed war crimes by having terrorist headquarters inside a hospital. Biden stressed that Israeli operations will stop when the Hamas no longer has the ability to do horrific things to Israelis.
The first war crime is being committed by Hamas by having their headquarters, their military, hidden under a hospital. And that's a fact. That's what's happened. Israel did not go in with a large number of troops, did not raid, did not rush everything down. They've gone in, and they've gone in with their soldiers carrying weapons or guns. I think it's going to stop when Hamas no longer maintains the capacity to murder and abuse and just do horrific things to the Israelis.
President Joe Biden referred to Chinese President Xi Jinping as a dictator. Now, Biden's remark at the end of his meeting with Xi Jinping came after he was asked if he still considers Xi as a dictator.
We're talking to our competitors, and the key, and just talking, just being blunt with one another, so there's no misunderstanding, as a key element to maintaining global stability and delivery for the American people. Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that's based on a form of government totally different than ours.
And earlier at the meeting, Xi Jinping called the U.S.-China relationship the most important bilateral relationship in the world and said that he and Biden should shoulder heavy responsibilities for the world and for history.
The China-U.S. relationship, which is the most important bilateral relationship in the world, should be perceived and envisioned in a broad context of the accelerating global transformations unseen in a century. It should develop in a way that benefits our two peoples and fulfills our responsibility for human progress. China-U.S. relationship has never been smooth sailing over the past 50 years or more, and it always faces problems of one kind or another. Yet it has kept moving forward amid twists and turns. For two large countries like China and the United States, turning their back on each other is not an option.
Israel has said that its fighter jets struck top Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh's house in Gaza. It said that Haniyeh's house was used as a terrorist infrastructure and that it often served as a meeting point for Hamas's senior leaders to direct terror attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers alike. Haniyeh, who is Hamas's political bureau chief, is currently living in Qatar. The strike came as Israeli President Isaac Herzog said that a very strong force may be needed to remain in Gaza in the future to prevent the Hamas from re-emerging after the conflict. In some updates on the Israel-Gaza conflict, Israeli Defense Forces said that they found a command center, weapons and combat gear belonging to the Hamas terrorists in Gaza's biggest hospital on Wednesday. The military simultaneously released a video showing some of the materials it recovered from an undisclosed building inside the hospital compound. IDF spokesperson Jonathan Cornicus in the video said that the Hamas systematically uses hospitals in their military operations.
So we're inside the MRI center of the Shifa hospital. Israeli troops breached here a few hours ago, and we have cleared the area, make sure that it's safe. And a few of the most interesting things that we have found totally confirm, without any doubt, that Hamas systematically uses hospitals in their military operations in violation of international law. And what we have found, I think, is only the tip of the iceberg. I'll show you what our troops exposed just minutes ago. In military terms, this is a grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant. And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you will be able to see is military equipment. There is an AK-47, there are cartridges, ammo, there are grenades in here, of course uniform, and all of this was hidden very conveniently, secretly behind the MRI machine. On the other side, we found a backpack with what appears to be very important intelligence, including a laptop, and we'll show you that momentarily.
Chief Israeli military spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari in a press conference confirmed that Israeli troops found weapons, combat gear and technological equipment inside the Al-Shifa hospital.
In the hospital, we have found weapons, intelligence, military technology, and military equipment. Additionally, an operational command center and technological assets belonging to Hamas. The technology and the materials have been sent to intelligence for inspection and review.
Israel on Thursday released what it said was a video showing its airstrikes on Hezbollah sites in response to what it said was an anti-tank missile launched from Lebanon towards the area of Shlomi in northern Israel. Israel began its campaign against the Hamas, the Islamist group that rules Gaza, after its militants rampaged through southern Israel on the 7th of October. Israel says 1,200 people were killed and about 240 people taken hostage in the deadliest day in its 75-year-old history. And as Israel-Hamas conflict enters the second month, calls for humanitarian pause in the Gaza Strip have been intensified by world leaders. The UN Security Council has called for urgent and extended humanitarian pauses in the conflict between Israel and the Hamas in the Palestinian enclave for a sufficient number of days to allow aid access. The UN Security Council adopted the resolution drafted by Malta on Wednesday.
We also know that while this resolution is critical, its passage alone will not save lives. Actions on the ground will. We've worked with Israel, its neighbors, the United Nations, and other partners to get aid into the hands of vulnerable Gazans. And we have secured initial steps for critical humanitarian pauses that should be coordinated with the UN to enable hostage release, help civilians reach safe areas, increase the flow of aid, and ensure it reaches those in need.
Sarah Coates joins us from Tel Aviv for more. Sarah, what are you hearing about the situation at the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza?
Hello there. Well, look, we are hearing reports coming in at this hour that Israeli troops do remain on the ground inside this Al-Shifa complex. Some images emerged a little earlier showing what appear to be armoured bulldozers moving through this 22-acre compound. And look, this comes a day after, as you mentioned, the Israeli Defence Forces released pictures of what it says are weapons that belong to Hamas fighters. They were found inside Al-Shifa hospital. But one thing that was missing is this evidence of this nerve centre, this command centre, which Israel continues to allege is operating underneath Al-Shifa hospital, a claim which continues to be backed up by the United States. Now, we do understand, according to a number of reports on the ground, that one of these surgical buildings has been extensively damaged at Al-Shifa hospital, while people inside that hospital, including doctors, say that troops went from room to room interrogating people, although Israel denies that claim, saying that there was no friction with anyone inside the hospital. Now, elsewhere in the region, you mentioned Israel has struck the home of Ismail Haniyeh. He's actually living abroad. That's the head of Hamas. He's been living abroad for a number of years between Qatar and Turkey. So it's unclear at this hour whether anyone was actually inside that home. But look, large plumes of smoke continue to rise in the skyline above the Gaza Strip, while in another part of the region, near the West Bank, or in the West Bank, I should say, just south of Jerusalem, there's just been an attack on a checkpoint there. The Israeli Medical Service and police say that 6 Israelis have been wounded. We do understand one of those critically. Well, it's understood these 3 people who opened fire on Israelis trying to cross through this checkpoint, they were reportedly shot dead at the scene, with police sappers, bomb squads right now on the ground, with reports that there is an explosive device there.
Now, there are around 240 hostages in Gaza as we speak. What can you tell us about the efforts to release them?
Well, look, Reuters is reporting that Thai Muslim politicians are saying that they've just been given a guarantee by Hamas that any Thai captives that are being held inside the Gaza Strip, that's believed to be around 25 people, will be among the first to be released if this deal that we've been widely speaking about actually happens. Now, this deal is reportedly being brokered by Qatar in between Israel and Hamas. It would potentially see the release of around 50 of these hostages from the Gaza Strip in exchange for the release of women, children, teenagers from Israeli prisons. We don't have a number on exactly how many people that could be, but some of the things that Hamas is asking for is unfiltered aid into the Gaza Strip, including petrol. Well, Israel says that it would like a full list of names of everyone who is alive in the Gaza Strip. Now, no word yet on where that deal is, when it could potentially be brokered, or if these two parties have agreed to the terms. But we did hear from the US President Joe Biden just a short while ago, a few hours ago. He said he's mildly hopeful there could be a deal to free these hostages, while the French President Emmanuel Macron is also weighing in. He tweeted a number of hours ago in Hebrew saying that France is doing everything it can, putting all of its efforts into getting these hostages out.
Right. All right, we'll leave it at that, Sarah. Thank you. Appreciate it. That was Sarah Coates reporting live from Tel Aviv. And still to come on DD India News Hour. At the APEC summit in San Francisco, the leaders announced a consensus on nearly all points for final joint declaration. US Congress passes stopgap funding bill, averts government shutdown. And India's Defence Minister takes part in the ASEAN Defence Ministers Plus meeting in Jakarta.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change. Tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. At the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC summit in San Francisco, the leaders announced a consensus on nearly all points for the final joint declaration. Ministerial meetings held on Thursday focused on combating corruption, while India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal met with US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. DD India's Simon Marks sent us this report. Take a look.
This summit was in large measure on Wednesday overshadowed by the meeting 40 minutes away from here between US President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. But while that was taking place in the countryside, here in the city, hard work continued in an effort to bridge differences so that this summit can lead to a muscular joint declaration. US Trade Representative Catherine Tai says consensus has been reached on nearly all paragraphs included in the declaration, but tensions were evident here again over the Israeli assault on Gaza, with representatives from Malaysia and Indonesia demanding a ceasefire. American officials say they believe it is possible differences over Gaza and other issues can be accommodated as negotiations continue. Meanwhile, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal continues representing the country as a guest economy invited here by President Biden. He met US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, officially launching the two countries' innovation handshake agenda. It was set in train when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited President Biden at the White House in June. Minister Goyal called the innovation handshake a joint commitment to strengthen the startup ecosystem and promote cooperation in critical and emerging technologies. Commerce Secretary Raimondo defined it as a critical tech partnership, with further events due to take place in Silicon Valley, just to the south of us here, next year. Simon Marks for DD India at the APEC summit in San Francisco.
India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, who is on a visit to the US, held a meeting with the chartered accountants from the San Francisco chapter of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, or the ICAI, and extended his greetings to them on the launch of the US-India Trade Desk at the ICAI. Minister Goyal highlighted how the CA fraternity, with their skill sets and networks, can contribute to further strengthening the India-US economic partnership. Moving on to some other news, the US Senate has averted a partial government shutdown on Wednesday as it passed a stopgap spending bill and sent it to President Joe Biden to sign into law before a weekend deadline. The 87-11 vote marked the end of this year's third fiscal standoff in the Congress that saw lawmakers bring Washington, D.C. to the brink of defaulting on its more than $31 trillion of debt. A partial shutdown would have led to delayed salary payments to 4 million federal government employees. Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has underlined the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to ensure peace and stability in the world. He was speaking in Jakarta at the ASEAN Defence Ministers Plus meeting, in which India is participating as a dialogue partner. Patrick Falk reports.
Well, speaking before the defence ministers of ASEAN, Rajnath Singh talked about the importance of engagement and dialogue, and also said that India is committed to freedom of navigation, overflight and unimpeded commerce in international waters in line with global norms. There was no mention of China, but there was no doubt a reference to China's growing military assertiveness in the South China Sea. These would have been welcome words for the Philippines in particular, which has been embroiled in several testy confrontations with China over territorial disputes in recent days. India is participating in Jakarta as a dialogue partner. It is an opportunity for it to deepen security ties with ASEAN member nations, and reports say that Singh will meet with the defense chief of Vietnam and that the two sides will aim to deepen security ties, and that India may also share Brahma and Akash air defense missiles with the Southeast Asian nations. In addition, reports say that there will be a meeting with Indonesian Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto, and that the two will be discussing joint patrols of the Malacca Straits. That's important in particular because Prabowo Subianto is currently the front runner in polls for Indonesia's presidential race. There is talk about a Quad Plus grouping to include Indonesia as well. And if Prabowo Subianto does become Indonesia's next leader, it is likely that he will be the one who decides on whether or not to sign off on that.
Indonesia officially handed over the chairmanship of the ASEAN Defence Ministers meeting to Laos on Thursday. The bloc is currently holding its Defence Ministers meeting in Jakarta. Representatives from non-ASEAN countries such as China and South Korea also attended the summit. In more news from the Indo-Pacific, Myanmar's junta has reported a heavy assault by insurgents and asked government to prepare for emergencies. Even the media has reported being asked that those with military experience should be prepared to serve. A junta spokesperson said the military was facing heavy assaults from a number of armed rebel soldiers in various regions. Myanmar's military has fought ethnic minority and other insurgencies for decades, but a coup in 2021 has brought unprecedented coordination between anti-military forces, which is the most serious challenge for the army. Meanwhile, in the ASEAN Defence Ministers meeting, Indonesia's Defence Minister said Southeast Asia's regional bloc, the ASEAN, will not interfere in the internal problems of any one country. India's External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar has concluded a 5-day visit to the UK on Wednesday. Last on his itinerary was an interview with journalist Lionel Barber, in which he responded to a question on the India-Canada row. He said that Canada has not shared any evidence with India to support its allegation. Minister Jaishankar said India is not ruling out an investigation but has asked Canada to share the evidence.
If you have a reason to make such an allegation, please share the evidence with us. We are not ruling out an investigation and looking at anything which they may have to offer.
Now take a look at some more stories making news around the world. U.S. Capitol Police officers in riot clashes with dozens of protesters who gathered outside the headquarters in Washington, D.C. to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Police officers pushed the protesters down by using pepper spray and fired projectiles as an attempt to stop the protest. The Australian government to introduce restrictions on immigration of detainees with criminal records released after High Court ruling. The High Court had said that the indefinite immigration detention pursued by Australia for more than 2 decades was unlawful and that they would implement restrictions to avoid potential risks to national security. In Madagascar, voters headed to the polls early on Thursday in a presidential election amid opposition boycotted and marred weeks of violent protests. President Andry Rajoelina faces growing isolation after leading opposition figures, including 2 former presidents, declared him unfit to run and called on their supporters to abstain from voting. A man arrested after a car crashed into a barricade near the entrance of the Israeli embassy in Tokyo on Thursday. An official at the Israeli embassy said the matter was under police investigation. The incident took place at an area near the embassy, which has been the site of a handful of demonstrations against the Israel-Hamas conflict in recent weeks. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under pressure to resign after dip in popularity. The European Commission proposes 12th package of sanctions. A ban include imports of diamonds and liquid petroleum gas from Russia. And UN World Meteorological Organization says levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere reached a new record high last year.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Right, in some more news on this broadcast, the European Commission has proposed a ban on imports of diamonds and liquid petroleum gas from Russia in the latest sanctions against Moscow. They're also set to place a price cap on crude oil. The bloc will discuss on this 12th sanctions package also contains a ban on the transit of goods through Russia and technologies that could boost the country's industrial capabilities. Ban on import of certain metals are also under consideration. Agreement on the final package is expected to take weeks, as the deal will require unanimous backing of all 27 EU states. In response to these sanctions, Russia says that sanctions were part of a hybrid war influenced by the West.
This is not just a package, it's a hybrid war. You need to understand this. Essentially, because of the never-ending flow of sanctions, Washington is using these sanctions for its anti-Russian policy without even asking Brussels or the people of these European countries if it's in their interest and whether it contradicts their aim and goals.
Союз превратился в полезного идиота Вашингтона.
And Alex Carrier now joins us from Brussels for more on this developing story. Alex, what more can you tell us about the proposed EU sanctions against Moscow in general and Russian diamonds in particular?
Well, generally speaking, the message from the EU officials I've spoken to about this round of sanctions is very clear. It's the fact that they want to prevent Russia from being able to finance its invasion of Ukraine. And to the point made by the Russian officials about a hybrid war, the EU officials are very clear. These sanctions did not exist and were not put in place before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That was the cause of all of this pushback from the European Union. The goal, as I mentioned, is to reduce Russia's ability to finance that invasion. $4.5 billion will be wiped off the Russian economy from that diamond ban. So that will be the ban of the sale of all diamonds, rough or in jewelry, across the European Union. That is a huge market for those diamonds coming out of the mines in Siberia. The reason it took so long is because Belgium, right here in Belgium, has one of the world's biggest diamond hubs in Antwerp, about an hour from where I'm speaking to you from. So that was the reason why there was a bit of a delay. Belgium is now on board. These proposals will go to the member states. They will discuss them for the first time tomorrow to go through the detail, cross the T's, dot the I's, and then these sanctions will be signed off by the leaders in mid-December. The other point of this 12th round of sanction is really tightening the screws and closing the loopholes that were left from the 11 first rounds of sanctions. So avoiding circumvention will be the big focus. So, for example, countries near Russia that are importing goods and then illegally sending them to Russia, things like that will be tightened. We know that the oil price cap that you mentioned capped the sale of Russian oil to anywhere in the EU to $60. That has not been easily enforceable. So again, the focus will be on closing that loophole. So very much making sure the existing sanctions have their impact, have their effect, and also that new Russian diamond ban.
Also, Alex, talking about the Ukraine-Russia conflict, how is the EU planning to fill any gaps in its military aid for Ukraine?
Well, with some difficulty is the honest answer to that. It has been tricky now. The European Union has already given vast amounts of military equipment or certainly reimbursed vast amounts of military equipment and a lot of financial aid to prop up the Ukrainian state and the functioning of the Ukrainian government in the face of Russia's invasion. But there are two tracks at the moment. There's the short-term military aid, about $520 million. That will be in military aid. That is currently being blocked by Hungary, and it needs unanimity across the member states. So that is a frustrating process. The other proposals was a €20 billion fund over 4 years, so $5 billion every year. And that was proposed by the European Commission, that building behind me. That found some resistance from member states who said, well, we don't exactly know what the situation will look like in 4 years. Perhaps that plan will turn to a year-on-year €5 billion plan. What's clear is that that is the EU level. Member states are still supporting Ukraine, are still sending financial aid and still sending military equipment.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Alex Carrier in Brussels, thank you for now. Appreciate it. In more news from Europe, UK's new Foreign Secretary David Cameron arrived in Kyiv on his first working visit abroad after taking charge. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky received the UK Foreign Secretary. The two leaders discussed the supply of weapons to and ways to further strengthen air defense systems. The leaders also spoke about ways to protect Ukrainians and critical Ukrainian infrastructure. Zelensky also thanked the UK for its support. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has said that he intended to intensify political and diplomatic efforts to sign a peace treaty with Azerbaijan, Russia's TASS news agency has reported. In late October, Pashinyan said he intended to conclude a peace treaty with Azerbaijan in the coming months. His comments came amid efforts to cement peace in the southern Caucasus after Azerbaijan retook the contested region of Nagorno-Karabakh. To the Americas now, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under pressure to resign or be forced out of the Liberal Party leadership because of his declining popularity in opinion polls. Even members of his own political party are calling on Justin Trudeau to resign as he is polling poorly and the public is furious about housing and inflation. With his popularity dwindling and citizens dissatisfied with housing and inflation, Trudeau is facing calls to resign from his own party. Now, as reported by the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has successfully enriched uranium to a level near that needed for nuclear weapons. The nation has shown resistance to providing essential cooperation to the agency, creating challenges for global authorities. The stockpile of highly enriched uranium has increased, but the rate at which Iran is enriching this material has slowed, potentially because of negotiations with the United States. The number of uranium-enriching centrifuges has remained unchanged, though, contributing further to escalating tensions between Iran and the international community. According to a recent UN World Meteorological Organization's report, the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have reached a new record high last year. The report unveiled that carbon dioxide levels were 50% above the pre-industrial era for the first time. WMO Secretary General Professor Petteri Talas highlighted disastrous consequences of further temperature increases, heat waves, extreme rainfall, glacier melt and sea level rises. The UN agency warned that current temperature levels could persist for decades, even with rapid emissions reduction. Measures to reduce fossil fuel consumption are essential, it said.
We have again broken less comfortable records in main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide. And for example, now we have 150% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we had during the pre-industrial times. Climate change is not only a temperature issue, but it's wider change in our behavior of atmosphere, and we have already seen practically the whole planet has seen an increase of heat waves. About half of the planet has been facing an increase of flooding events, and 1/3 of the planet has been facing an increase of drought events, and this negative trend will continue until 2060s.
25 people were killed in a fire at a coal company's office building on Thursday in China's northern Shanxi province. The fire broke out at the 4-story Yongju Coal Industry joint building in the country's top coal-producing hub of Shanxi. The cause of the fire was still under investigation. China's coal producers are also under scrutiny for a series of accidents in mines in recent months, which has weighed on production as mines stop work for safety inspections. To South Asia now, in Bangladesh, the death toll from dengue infection has risen to 1,520, with a record high 24 single-day casualties reported till Wednesday. Besides, 1,623 new dengue patients were hospitalized during the same period. The entire medical system in Bangladesh has been put under tremendous pressure because of the unexpected dengue outbreak. Experts say that a lack of a coordinated response and a sustainable policy are causing more deaths from the mosquito-transmitted disease. And staying in South Asia, India is going to host the second edition of the Voice of Global South Summit on 17th November to discuss challenges posed by global developments and to sustain momentum for a more inclusive world order. Similar to the first edition, the second Voice of Global South Summit will be held in a virtual format, and the inaugural and concluding sessions of the summit will be hosted by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The theme for the inaugural leaders session is Together for Everyone's Growth with Everyone's Trust, and the concluding leaders session's title is Global South Together for One Future. In more news from India, efforts are underway on day 5 to rescue 40 workers trapped in under-construction tunnel in the northern Indian state of Uttarakhand. As per the public relations officer of the Navyug company, all the trapped labourers are safe and they are also being continuously spoken to. The workers are also being given medicines and food through a pipe that's been drilled inside. Meanwhile, a drilling machine has been completely set up. The plan now is to use the machine to drill through the rubble of the tunnel's collapsed portion and insert mild steel pipes one after the other. Now, once this happens, the workers trapped on the other side of the rubble can crawl out to safety.
हमारी प्राथमिकता है कि हमारे लोग सुरक्षित रहें। हमारी प्राथमिकता है कि हम उनको जल्दी से जल्दी निकालें। नई मशीन अब काम कर रही है, जिसकी पावर भी ज़्यादा है और जिसकी स्पीड भी ज़्यादा है पुरानी मशीन के मुकाबले। और हमारी कोशिश है कि ये कार्य 2-3 दिन में पूरा हो जाए, जल्दी भी हो सकता है। हम अंतर्राष्ट्रीय एक्सपर्ट जो हैं उनकी भी मदद ले रहे हैं।
And now take a look at some other stories making news in India. India's President Draupadi Murmu attended the 3rd Audit Divas in India's capital, New Delhi, on Thursday. Addressing the gathering, President Murmu highlighted how CAG plays a pivotal role in building a developed India. A deep depression approaching with a speed of 17 kilometers per hour has been spotted in the west-central Bay of Bengal on Thursday. Authorities say the deep depression is likely to continue to move northeastwards and further intensify into a cyclonic storm in the next 24 hours. The Indian state of Madhya Pradesh is all set to undergo polls on Friday. All the polling teams will reach the polling stations by evening and take charge. There are a total of 2,049 polling stations in 7 assembly constituencies in Bhopal, and the counting of votes will take place on the 3rd of December. And still to come on DD India News Hour. India's exports grow by more than 6% to $33.5 billion. And Australia and South Africa battle for a spot in the Cricket World Cup final.
Swagato to West Bengal, India's cultural epicenter. West Bengal invites you to share its richness, to be united as one family with one shared vision of building a better tomorrow.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Shifting our focus to India, where the Ministry of Commerce and Industry has released trade data. Now, India's overall exports grew by more than 9% to an estimated $62.2 billion in October 2023. The overall trade deficit from April to October decreased by almost 35% when compared to the previous year. Merchandise exports grew by more than 6% in October. Now, 22 of the 30 key sectors under merchandise exports showed positive growth. Services exports are projected to grow by more than 6%. The estimated value of services exported between April and October this year stood at more than $192 billion. Major contributors to export growth in October included pharmaceuticals, engineering goods, electronics, iron ore, and ceramics. And now to all the news from the world of sport with Deepika. Deepika, take it away.
Thanks and good afternoon, Ramesh. Let's quickly bring a quick update on the ongoing semi-final between Australia and South Africa, which is currently underway in Eden Gardens. Well, five-time champions Australia are currently taking on South Africa in the second semi-final match in India's eastern city of Kolkata. South Africa earlier won the toss and elected to bat. They have suffered early losses as their captain Temba Bavuma was out for 0 and Quinton de Kock was out for 3. Both the teams have made 2 changes in the playing 11. Australia has included Glenn Maxwell and Mitchell Starc in place of Stoinis and Shaun Abbott. On the other hand, South Africa has brought in Tabriz Shamsi and Marco Jansen in place of Lunginigidi and Andale. Now, South Africa have never progressed beyond the semi-finals of the tournament, impeded by a combination of bad luck and nerves. They have looked formidable this time, having trounced Australia in the league phase. But Australia are on a 7-games winning streak. Now, till the last reports came in, South Africa were at 22 for a loss of 2 wickets. And now to discuss more on this, I'm joined by Anil Thomas straight from Eden Gardens, Kolkata. Good afternoon, Anil. If we talk about the toss, that brought some sort of relief for Team South Africa. But here, when we talk about the match, 2 wickets are already down. The current run rate is also very low. What do you think?
Good afternoon, Deepika. Well, very much on the expected lines, looking at the overcast conditions that you see here. There is a bit of rain that slowly started. You see drops of rain falling while we begin this broadcast live. But clearly things not looking good for South Africa from a perspective of the way Australia managed to build up pressure. There are no demons on the wicket, but the way Australia dried up those runs, almost saving close to 7 to 10 runs there in the first 5 hours of play. You saw Quinton de Kock, it was more a shot of desperation than a shot of confidence. And this happens, especially with a team that's a bit nervy playing in these knockout situations. I think Australia have extracted they have got the perfect recipe to put pressure on the Proteas, and they have at least managed success in the first 10 overs, picking up 2 South African wickets and pushing that, big acceleration that you see, especially with the South African batsmen, taking a beating, putting them on the mat and pushing them a bit, especially when it comes to going slowly on this particular track.
Considering the current...
Well, there is always a talk about South Africa and pressure. They go hand in hand. They are called perennial chokers, especially in cricket. But I think this particular team is different from the perspective of they are ready to take on challenges. Even before the match started, the captain Tuvuma in the press conference said that Australia is no Mickey Mouse team. So there is a bit of war of words that has taken place to the start of this match. And I think South Africans know that the pressure is done on them. Australia on a winning streak. But let's not forget, South Africa came back 2-0 down to win the 5-match series 3-2 in South Africa against Australians. They have thrashed Australia by 135 runs in this particular edition of the World Cup. So South Africa know how to get the better of Australians. It is just a matter of time. On this particular track, you need to be a bit patient, like the one in Wankhede. Rohit Sharma came out and played a blinder there, and that that blew the opposition away. I think South Africa needs someone to stand up and deliver that kind of a knock to put the pressure back on Australians, because the Australians right now are on top and the South Africans are feeling the heat. But surely this is going to be a comfortable situation to bat on this particular track. You just need to see that new ball, get 20 overs old, and you will see good runs coming on this particular track, especially for both the teams.
And while we talk about it, another wicket is down for South Africa. So it's 22 for a loss of 3 wickets now. Thank you so much, Anil, for joining us and bringing us the latest from Eden Gardens, Kolkata on the second semi-final. Now let's talk about India's victory. The Indian cricket team entered into the finals of World Cup, smashing a historic victory. Indian team has showed an exceptional performance this World Cup as they enter into the finals, winning all 10 matches so far, which includes 9 group stage and 1 semi-final. Now, Indian fans are all geared up for the finals, eagerly hoping that the Indian team will bring back the glory home. Here's, let's take a listen to the fans.
Today, you can see the environment around here. Everyone's joyous, everyone's happy, everyone's on their feet right now. Incredible performance. When Williamson and Mitchell was playing from over number 15 till over number 35, it was so difficult for us. They were not playing bad shots. They were playing really well. But the way our Mohammad Shami bowled, it was really brilliant. It was, I will say, it was so amazing. It was so incredible, and it was so beautiful at the end.
What I feel is that because if a player, drops a catch, so it is not easy to come again and bowl that amazing spell which Shami did, and the way he bowled, and getting Williamson out, and after that getting Latham out was incredibly an amazing stuff which he has done, and that was the turning point of the match.
Obviously, I think Australia will be a better opponent, not because they are a better team, I feel, but because I want the Indian team to take revenge of the 2003 World Cup and the 2015 World Cup, and given the fact that the way our team is performing, I think on 19th, the energy will be 100x here, and we'll be meeting again.
So by the end of the day, we will see who would be the possible finalist against Team India. So that was a quick wrap from the world of sports. Back to you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Deepika. Appreciate it. And that's all for this edition of DD India News. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. You can also check out our website, ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour. Any pics for this?